I've been using this for about 9 or 10 months now, and before this, I was on 2 years of using Razer's Tartarus keypads. Those were great, with special mention to the Pro version. Having such a good experience with those, I checked online for other offerings from other manufacturers, and the only one that ever really stood out for me was Azeron's keypad, which was the Cyborg one at the time. Towards the end of last year, I finally pulled the trigger and got the version 2 of the Cyborg. Now, keypads by themselves will be strange to a good amount of PC gamers, and this cyborg will even be stranger. Most keypads I've seen have a very similar layout to keyboards, where keys are typically activated by a downward press. Now, as you've noticed, this Azeron pad is going to be different. You do have the typical downward activation of keys, which is typical for any board, but you also have the activation via a forward, backward, upward, and yeah, you can say limited side press depending on the finger involved. You can configure the function of each key via the software, which we'll get into in a bit. This, yeah, it took some time to get used to. I think it took me about 2 or 3 weeks, and this includes the adjusting and spacing and basically the alignment. The advantage when you get used to it is that for gamers who have the speed to do so, they will even have a quicker access to all the keys that they need to use. For those that find it hard reaching over with individual fingers, this really just reduces the stress on your fingers. It's really good for quick taps and lessening distance traveled. If you do have issues with the alignment and distance of the towers and some keys, you can make adjustments to this keypad, which I really like. I won't show examples of each tower or each aspect of the board, but let me show you some ways you can make changes. When you're loosening the screws, the main point really is just to loosen the screws enough to make sure you can move the affected tower. When you're good with the position, don't get too excited when tightening the screw. Place it in just enough so it doesn't move while you're gaming. You don't want to wreck the keypad. I mentioned earlier that it did take some time to get used to the pad. For most of that, I spent it on finding the most comfortable alignment of the towers. It might be different for you, but my personal experience is trying to avoid clicking the towers above my fingers. I didn't realize how much I would lift my fingers when gaming, so it's really a good thing I don't really compete or anything like that. Still on the keys, you have your typical thumbstick, which is analog in nature and uses the Hall effect implementation, which limits stick drift and increases its longevity. Now, this is what I was missing from the Tartarus pads. Now, not that the thumbstick from Razors wasn't usable, it's just they didn't behave like a typical controller. Now, the implementation by Azeron allows for the usual 8 directional movements or the behavior similar to a joystick. So I think this is a great implementation for those who are using controllers on their PCs or those who are coming from consoles and moving to the PC platform for the first time. One more thing I want to mention about the analog stick is that you can reduce the travel distance for when you push it towards the edges via a restrictor ring. Now, this is one thing I immediately used. The shorter travel distance for the stick just works better for me. If you decide to play around with the restrictor, just make sure to calibrate via the software. Seriously, this thumbstick is a big factor when comparing Tartarus and this pad. Similar to the Razer pad I had before, this Cyborg has a palm rest, but it honestly isn't as comfortable as the Tartarus mainly because of the missing cushion. You can pick the palm rest for your keypad on Azeron's site when you place in your order. You can actually make a number of customizations, but at the moment, the cushion isn't one unless I missed something when making the order some months back. Now, if new versions come out offering a bit more comfort in the palm rest, I think that would be better. Mind you, it doesn't feel terrible when you use it, but coming from Razer's pad, it was something I did notice. Two more things I want to mention about the externals of this pad. The USB cable plugs in via the left side, and I have to say that the cable that comes with it is pretty flexible and very lengthy. It's not the lightest cable, but it's not something you really notice while you're gaming. So that's good in case your PC has some distance to the pad. The pad also has a profile switcher, which you can configure in the software, and the three profiles can be saved on the device itself. So if you want to set multiple profiles per game, you can also do that, but it will be machine dependent. Since we touched on profiles, let's have a quick look at the software that the Azeron offers, which comes from their own website. The first thing you notice is that it doesn't look fancy like other manufacturers' software. I do wish it had a bit more flair to it. Now, I'm not sure if that's the word I want to use, but make no mistake, it is very functional. It has everything you need to ensure you get the most out of your Azeron pad. Now, there are three main things I want to mention about this. This is where you configure the keys on your pad. I spent a good amount of time on this part. Now, I mentioned before that you can configure different profiles for the pad, but I really prefer having a single configuration for all my games. If I can help it. I guess that did contribute to the time spent in fine tuning the configuration of the keys. It would be easy actually if you were thinking of games like COD, but if you think of games like World of Warcraft with possibilities of so many keybinds, that can extend the time spent in finding the optimal key configuration in the Azeron software. Another thing about this software is that this allows you to change how the thumbstick behaves. I mentioned earlier that you can have the option for an 8 directional format or making it work like a typical analog stick. You can change it in the application, but it really depends on the game. So another aspect where you might spend more time in, you'll have to experiment on which thumbstick configuration will work best for you. The typical configuration I use are keyboard, or the second one, which is Xbox or keyboard plus joystick. If I don't want to bother with it, sometimes I just use the keyboard option, but it does mean I get limited in terms of movement in a game that might support analog input. One last thing I want to mention about the software is that this is where you calibrate the thumbstick. Now, I mentioned this earlier when using the restrictor ring. Actually, just make sure to calibrate when you use it for the first time, use the restrictor ring, or you remove the ring, or when picking a different configuration for the thumbstick. This is just to ensure you're getting the right feedback for the device. And yeah, there are other things you can do with the software, but those are the three things that stand out for me. So yeah, that's my take on Azeron Cyborg 2. I really wanted to add footage to compare against my Razer's pad, but I don't have either pad anymore. A lot of things have changed for me in the past few months. In fact, I don't have my old PC anymore. My other mice are gone. I kept this Cyborg. For the mice, I kept my HitScan and X-Lite mouse and a few other things. Now, what I'm saying here is that I really like this Cyborg 2 so much that it was one of the few things I decided to keep. It's really a great piece of hardware that I really recommend if you have any interest in keypads. So, thanks for watching, guys. You got Crave here, and I'll talk to you soon.